to begin with taking a couple of minutes to introduce you to my art practice. So I work within the realms of painting, drawing and collage. My works thematically examine ideas of fantasy, misplaced nostalgia, retrospect and feminism. My works can fit abstract or representational criteria depending on their intention. For example, my collages usually spotlight lone female protagonists navigating complex narratives of joy, despair, or uncertainty. My paintings, however, are usually abstract playgrounds of colour that allow a more open interpretation. So I've got some introductory slides to show you just with different examples of my work that I'll take you through first. My collage material is sourced from old books that I collect, so they're largely from the 60s and 70s. My obvious fascination with these eras was born from looking back at them through rose-tinted glasses. So I acknowledge that heavily romanticising this period of time is problematic in that the reality actually meant marginalised groups were still fighting for the most basic of civil rights. War raged in Vietnam, and women, particularly women of colour, were treated with even less respect than they are now. However, through these rose-tinted glasses, I'm able to cherry-pick what I see as the best of a tumultuous period in history. Things like an unapologetic use of colour, a fearlessness and dynamic use of pattern in fashion and beyond, psychedelia and pop culture, protest culture and hippie culture. By using imagery of women from these eras in my collage works, I'm able to transport them into a contemporary utopia that's neither truly representative of the time that they came from or of today. Materialistically, I like to use acrylic paint and textures. I like accessible and immediate materials that can convey a colour quickly and effectively. So my paintings are a little less grounded than my collages. They're more slippery. I work on canvas or on found fabric sourced from op shops. So I like painting as it is porous and forgiving, and I can work on much larger scales. An example of one of my works on found fabrics is this work here. I go through a process of bleaching and dyeing the fabric before stretching and painting on it. So I like the symbolic nature of stains, and how fabric can be so porous and hold so much emotional weight in it. As a surface, it's very satisfying to work on because you're sort of adding to this kind of surface that already has, you know, the emotional weight of being somebody's bed sheets for years or curtains or things like that. So it's much more interesting than a sort of white canvas at times. And then I just have some examples of my work hanging at the gallery that I'm represented at, which is Stainsinger in Flinders Lane. And it gives you an idea of scale. A lot of my collage works I scan high resolution and then print on fabric on a large scale. So I really like the kind of billowing quality of that and how it can transform something that's usually quite intimate and small onto like a larger, more kind of commanding presence. So the feature presentation, obviously today, is a talk surrounding the theme of mystery. Initially, I was going to discuss my work in relation to how it kind of represents an element of mystery in women and in how women sort of live, think and act. And it sort of got a bit out of hand. So I tried to pare it back to more of a personal experience. There's actually more handleable and more relatable, I think, into how, we can think about mystery in the age of social media. So, obviously, I love Instagram. I downloaded the app in 2012 and I have not looked back. I've always been one to share my work in digital realms. I see a divide between artists who choose to use social media as an alternative gallery space, who also exhibit their opinions and lifestyle, and those who don't. While neither way is right or wrong, I do identify a staunch braveness in those who stand on the same plane as their artwork and are accessible behind a screen to justify their ideas and opinions. It's courageous to show your work to an audience that's wider than your bubble of a local artist-run space or your university peers. It's insurmountably generous to provide behind-the-scenes information on the production of your work, to speak about your struggles, rejections, and successes. While artists who don't use social media can make waves in galleries, and in particular, usually privileged social or political scenes, artists who show in galleries and/or use social media can make waves across the world immediately, without resources like publicists, agents, or gallerists. We needn't wait around to get written about in history books, nor rely on anyone else to make it happen. The New York Times, in an article on the 20th of January, says, Instagram has become the leading social media tool for discovering, showing, and following art, particularly for people under the age of 35, and I don't disagree. It is in this statement that lies the triumphs and also the problems of social media. While scrolling through my Instagram feed a couple of weeks ago, I came across an image of one of my artworks, which is not super unusual until I saw that it was posted to an account with 2.3 million followers. Sans any acknowledgement to me as the artist. The uncredited collage, actually titled For You Baby, made in 2014, garnered over 14,000 likes on the Instagram account. The caption that originally accompanied the post was, "One for them, one for you, #new arrivals." Essentially, my work was being used to publicize the fact that this company had new arrivals for sale on their website. So the unsolicited sharing of my work happens all the time, and sometimes I bother following up and usually receive an apology and a sentence of pleaded ignorance, about not knowing that the work was mine. Other times I don't even know it's happened, and I suppose people just assume the artwork mysteriously appeared out of nowhere. So this instance stood out as a particularly insulting example, I think due to the sheer scale of saturation. So when I was younger, I accepted the intermittent erasure of my authorship as a consequence of making my artwork so readily available online. Now I see it as a toxic laziness that contributes to a larger, more damaging narrative of artists having to struggle to earn a living. So, thank you. Sorry if I'm a bit sort of nervous, I'm talking a bit quickly, sorry. So in the flurry of comments that followed after I had drawn attention to my lack of credit, one stood out as a particularly interesting example. And it highlighted the seeming contradiction between me demanding credit for my artwork and the lack of credit that I provided for the source of the imagery I used to make the collage. While those privileged enough to have an art school education had creative freedoms drilled into them from day one, aka me, it occurred to me that it could appear to a lot of other people that I was not practicing what I had preached. So to explain, in a very quick collage and decoupage 101, while making collage work largely from 1960s and 1970s imagery, I employ the fair use doctrine, which states that the use of printed material must be transformative from its original intention. I stick to these rules because I know how it feels when someone doesn't at your expense. I am fluent in Australian copyright laws and know things like, for example, copyright actually expires on printed material 70 years after the death of the person who created it. And after clearing those muddy waters up and proudly stating that no, I've never had any issues with copyright infringement, I tried to articulate just how damaging to artists it can be to post their imagery as mysterious #inspiration posts online. When an artwork is posted on a social media platform without acknowledgement of the artist, the narrative of a creative origin or process is erased. The erasure of this subsequently means the erasure of the artist. The artwork is then devalued due to the disassociation it now possesses from any human emotion or intention. It becomes a faceless entity, void of warmth, that is reduced merely to aesthetically pleasing pixels for thousands to thumb past in a millisecond's interaction with no thought for its basis. Crediting someone for their artwork is like saying please or thank you. It's simple enough in theory, but in practice, a whole other story. It's why I don't follow faceless inspiration accounts on Instagram or use sites like Pinterest. These seemingly languid platforms populate anonymous imagery to form an aesthetic that is deemed at once cool and mindlessly attractive, worthy of a double tap here and there. As a more than avid user of social media, I am courteous when it comes to posting imagery from elsewhere. If you can't catfish, reverse Google image search something you found back to the source in order to credit it correctly, don't post it. It's really simple. So with no acknowledgement of the artist, people begin to think that imagery like my work, For You Baby, just mysteriously appears for free use. It is this consequence that damages the livelihood of young artists like myself, for it perpetuates an attitude that people shouldn't value art monetarily. Source unknown leaves a work a mystery entity with absolutely no reference point, and excludes the artist from any possible discourse leading to wider awareness of their work or even a potential sale. As small as these things may seem, an Instagram tag or a caption underneath an image, they are literal currency for artists. I don't believe in source unknown because I know too many people out there who've been isolated by that label before. Artists exist and selflessly create the content that makes being on Instagram so much more fulfilling. While the population of their work may make it seem expendable, it is always the credit and authorship that revitalizes that magic. For an image to be born from the mystic of a human is so much more satisfying than it being a mystery, and I hope all who've listened today can perpetuate that notion in order to preserve the careers of the artists they love to follow. So in regards to my collage going uncredited on Instagram in front of 2.3 million followers, I kicked up a mighty fuss, and my own followers amazingly helped me do so. And 6 hours after the image was posted, it was very reluctantly credited, and then 48 hours after the image was posted, I was offered a $200 gift voucher to the company's online store in exchange for my silence, which I politely declined. I wrote a blog post the next day. As a woman, I am intrinsically made of mystery, but two things are certain. I'm the author of my artwork, and do not mess with me on the internet. Okay, thank you.